Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. Jen Sidwell's quiet tightening of the noose around Henry Hank Dalton's neck begins long before Port Charles realizes that a storm is descending upon them, and as November 17th to 21st unfolds, a week already primed with tension, political ambition, and interconnected secrets, the signs become impossible to ignore that both Dalton and Laura Collins are about to face consequences far more devastating than anything they imagined. Dalton, once merely an irritating academic with an inflated ego and fragile pride, has grown increasingly reckless, making himself a liability to Sidwell's broader operation. His obsession with punishing Rocco Falconeri for the break-in at his PCU lab has consumed him so deeply that he ignores Sidwell's explicit commands to stay quiet, back off, and avoid stirring the kind of trouble that invites scrutiny. But Dalton cannot help himself, whether it's arrogance, desperation, or the thrill of holding power over a young teen. He presents fabricated evidence to ensure Rocco receives a harsher penalty. This act alone already places Dalton in Sidwell's crosshairs, yet it's the ripple effects of this stunt that amplify the stakes. Laura Collins, the fiercely protective grandmother and sitting mayor of Port Charles, instantly sees through Dalton's deceit during the November 14th confrontation. Outraged and unwilling to let a corrupt professor railroad her grandson, she lashes out publicly, creating a scene in front of reporters whose cameras and microphones seize on every word. The explosion is instantaneous. Laura's once commanding lead in the mayoral race shrinks to a dangerously thin margin as her opponent, the slimy, opportunistic councilman Ezra Boyle, revels in any scandal tarnishing her image. He has waited years for an opening, and now, with Dalton making headlines, Laura teetering on political disaster, and public opinion wavering, Ezra senses that Sidwell's influence might finally propel him into the mayor's office. Meanwhile, Sidwell watches the chaos with calculating precision, realizing that Dalton has not only disobeyed him but has become a rotten thread that must be snipped before it unravels everything. Dalton has been dragging his feet on the crucial research tied to Caesar Faison's final project and openly resisting Britt Westbourne's involvement, another unforgivable act in Sidwell's eyes. To Sidwell, Dalton is a tool that has outlived its usefulness, now more of a hazard than an asset. And where others might hesitate at disposing of a loose end, Sidwell sees an opportunity: eliminate Dalton and simultaneously destroy Laura's career, clearing the path for Ezra, his obedient puppet, to take over Port Charles from the mayor's seat. As the new week begins, GH previews hint at Sidwell issuing a warning to a traitor, a clear indication that someone within his circle is about to be silenced. Dalton's fate becomes almost sealed the moment he ignores this final opportunity to fall in line. Laura, too, is unknowingly playing her role in Sidwell's larger scheme. Her fiery confrontation with Dalton, captured by every press outlet in town, becomes the perfect ammunition to frame her later. With public sentiment turning fragile and the election only days away, one more scandal, especially a violent one, would all but guarantee her downfall. Sidwell, a master strategist who never leaves a detail to chance, begins orchestrating a scenario that blends timing, optics, and manipulation with chilling efficiency. His objective is simple: remove Dalton permanently while ensuring Laura takes the fall in the most incriminating way possible. GH previews for November 17th to 21st depict Laura in a moment of terror, clutching her car keys, gasping in horror as she steps out into the darkness. It's clear she believes she has hit something, or someone. The dim lighting, the eerie quiet, the frantic expression on her face all point toward a tragedy that will instantly ignite a media firestorm. And given the political climate, the stakes could not be higher. What the audience doesn't yet realize is that Sidwell has already planned every second of this setup. Dalton's death, in Sidwell's blueprint, is designed not as a random act of violence but as a meticulously staged event. The most stunning, and sinister, possibility is that Sidwell intends for Laura to hit Dalton only after Dalton is already dead. By positioning Dalton's lifeless body in Laura's car path, Sidwell can craft an airtight illusion that the mayor herself caused his death in a reckless moment, perhaps while distracted, emotional, or angry after their earlier confrontation. It is a perfect trap because it weaponizes Laura's own integrity and her desire to defend her family against her. Once she reacts in horror, exits the car, and discovers Dalton, the narrative will write itself: a scandal-plagued mayor, already publicly feuding with the victim, now seemingly responsible for his sudden demise. For voters, it becomes less about evidence and more about optics, and the optics are catastrophic. Sidwell knows this. Ezra knows this. And as the election clock ticks down, the stage is set for Laura's destruction. The timing could not be more strategic. The election occurs midweek, offering Sidwell the rare alignment of political vulnerability, public tension, and narrative control. By framing Laura so close to the vote, he ensures she has no time to clear her name, no time to mount a defense, no time to battle the tidal wave of outrage that will sweep through Port Charles. Her supporters will falter. Undecided voters will flee. Ezra's camp will explode with fabricated sympathy and performative grief, painting him as the moral alternative to a mayor now under suspicion for a fatal hit-and-run. And all the while, Sidwell pulls every string from behind the curtain. What makes this plot even darker is that Sidwell is acting not merely out of convenience but out of retaliation. Laura has long been an obstacle to his expansion, refusing to allow him control of Sonny Corinthos's peers or influence over the city's most valuable districts. Removing her is not just political, it is personal. Sidwell believes Port Charles belongs to him, and with Laura removed and Ezra installed as his puppet mayor, he can finally operate without resistance. Dalton's murder becomes the linchpin of this takeover, a necessary sacrifice to cleanse the board. Meanwhile, Laura's personal anguish becomes part of the spectacle. Her shock, her confusion, her frantic attempts to understand what she has supposedly done, Sidwell welcomes all of it. To the public, her reaction will look like guilt, panic, or fear of consequences. To Sidwell, it looks like victory. As the week progresses, the chaos spreads from the mayor's office to the police department, to the media, to the Falconeri family, and beyond. Questions mount. Did Laura hit Dalton? Was it an accident? Was it premeditated? Why did she confront him earlier that day? Why was he on the road at that hour? Every detail, every fragment of Laura's behavior will be dissected and spun to fit Sidwell's crafted version of events. And in the middle of it all, Laura, Port Charles's most respected leader, a woman who has survived more tragedy than anyone, now finds herself at the epicenter of Sidwell's most ruthless plot. By the time the dust settles, Dalton will be gone, Laura will be under investigation, Ezra will be celebrating a political triumph he never earned, and Sidwell will have cemented his grip on Port Charles through fear, manipulation, and murder. What remains uncertain is whether Laura's allies, Sonny, Dante, Spencer, or even Britt, will piece together the truth before Sidwell's web tightens fully around the city. But in a week packed with suspense, danger, and November sweeps-level shocks, one thing is certain: Sidwell's plan is deadly, calculated, and devastating, and Laura Collins, unfairly and unwillingly, is about to pay the ultimate price for a murder she never committed. As the sinister gears of Jen Sidwell's plot continue to grind forward, the aftermath of Dalton's impending death begins radiating outward in ways that touch nearly every corner of Port Charles, creating a ripple effect that reaches far beyond Laura Collins's immediate political crisis. The city itself almost seems to vibrate with tension, as if some subconscious awareness of the storm preparing to break is spreading through its citizens. At the police station, Dante Falconeri senses something is off the moment he hears chatter about Dalton's unexpected absence from campus. While Dante doesn't yet know that Dalton's disappearance is linked to Laura's upcoming nightmare, his instincts, honed by years of detective work and countless battles with corruption, begin to whisper that something darker is unfolding beneath the surface. But even Dante, with all his experience, has no idea how far Sidwell's influence reaches or how meticulously he has set every chess piece in place. Sidwell, always 10 steps ahead, ensures that Dalton's murder is invisible, clean, and nearly impossible to trace, using methods that leave minimal evidence and maximum confusion. Once Dalton is dead, his body becomes nothing more than a prop to Sidwell, a tool to stage the scene that will destroy Laura. His men move quickly under cover of darkness, positioning Dalton in the exact location where Laura's car will pass after a late-night meeting with campaign advisors who are scrambling to contain the fallout from the earlier confrontation. Laura, exhausted, emotionally drained, and distracted by her fears for Rocco, becomes the perfect unwitting pawn for Sidwell's trap. Every element is timed with chilling precision: the dim street lights, the curve in the road where visibility is weakest, the strategic placement of Dalton's body to mimic the position of someone who staggered into the street. And then, when Laura's headlights fall upon the figure too late for her to react, everything unfolds in mere seconds, her brakes screeching, her breath catching, her heart slamming in her chest as she stumbles out of the vehicle to discover the horror before her. The shock that grips her body is instant and paralyzing. She can barely process what she's seeing. Dalton, the man she argued with only hours earlier, lies motionless, his body illuminated by the pale glow of her headlights, his skin already cold. The moment is so surreal that Laura feels as though she's stepped out of her own life and into someone else's nightmare. And this visceral, devastating reaction, is exactly what Sidwell is counting on. He knows Laura is incapable of faking emotions, incapable of crafting a calculated response in such a moment. Her shock, her panic, her desperation will all be interpreted by the public as guilt. He understands human psychology as well as he understands crime, and he uses both to weaponize the situation perfectly. Within minutes of Laura calling for help, Sidwell has already tipped off select media outlets known for sensationalizing and twisting stories to his advantage. He intends for the narrative to spread rapidly, long before the facts can catch up. Reporters swarm the scene, shoving microphones toward Laura's face, shouting questions that blur together in a cacophony of accusation. Mayor Collins, were you involved in an accident? Mayor, what was your relationship with Professor Dalton? Mayor, did your earlier confrontation escalate? Their cameras capture her trembling hands, her wide, tear-filled eyes, her inability to form coherent answers as she tries to comprehend what has happened. And as those images broadcast across Port Charles, public perception begins to shift in real time. Voters who once saw strength in Laura's leadership now see vulnerability and uncertainty, while Ezra Boyle capitalizes on the crisis instantly. His campaign releases a statement dripping with performative sympathy, expressing concern for Dalton's loved ones and vowing to bring transparency back to the mayor's office, all while subtly suggesting that Laura may be unfit to lead the city in such turbulent times. Backstage, however, Ezra is privately giddy, practically vibrating with excitement as he anticipates his impending victory. He knows the election was already tightening, but this scandal, is a political miracle delivered right into his hands. Meanwhile, Sidwell watches everything unfold with icy satisfaction, savoring how smoothly his operation is running. With Laura compromised and Dalton eliminated, the path is clear for him to seize control of Sonny Corinthos's peers, further expand his influence, and mold Port Charles into a city that bends to his will. But what Sidwell doesn't account for, or perhaps underestimates, is the resilience of Laura's allies and the loyalty she has earned over decades of fighting for her family and her city. Sonny Corinthos, upon hearing the news, immediately senses something amiss. He knows Laura well enough to recognize that she would never flee the scene, never lie, never harm someone intentionally. Her genuine distress tells him this situation is not what it appears. And Sonny, unlike most, understands the subtle signatures of a staged crime. He's seen too many enemies over the years craft carefully orchestrated attacks designed to mimic accidents or setups. Dawson, Brick, Spinelli, any number of Sonny's confidants, could help uncover the digital or physical breadcrumbs Sidwell left behind, because even the most meticulous crime leaves traces to those who know where to look. Dante, too, begins feeling the uneasy stirrings of suspicion as he examines the scene. Something about Dalton's injuries doesn't entirely align with the collision pattern. His experience tells him that the damage appears pre-existing in some places, inconsistent in others. He doesn't voice this immediately, protocol demands caution, but the doubt lodges itself in his mind like a seed waiting to grow. Spencer Cassadine, fiercely protective of his grandmother, instantly throws himself into uncovering any detail that might exonerate Laura. He recalls overhearing conversations about Sidwell's growing presence in Port Charles, his financial connections, his quietly expanding reach. Spencer's instincts, often impulsive but occasionally sharp, pull him toward the belief that someone powerful is behind this. Even Britt Westbourne, who has had her own battles with Sidwell's expectations, feels a twinge of guilt. She knows Dalton was on thin ice with Sidwell. She witnessed the tension, the arguments, the subtle threats that slipped into conversations. And though she never imagined Sidwell would go this far, she begins connecting pieces that no longer feel coincidental. As the hours pass, Port Charles transforms into a battlefield of public opinion, political maneuvering, and whispered conspiracies. Laura, devastated, is forced to submit to questioning, though every fiber of her being aches under the implication that she is responsible for someone's death. She tries to recall every second leading up to the moment of impact, but her mind is foggy, replaying flashes of headlights, darkness, and Dalton's still body. She is trapped between her own memory and the cold, ugly image the media is constructing around her. Her campaign staff scrambles to release statements emphasizing her cooperation and character, but in a scandal of this scale, words feel hollow. Public uproar intensifies. Some citizens demand her resignation immediately, while others cling to their faith in her integrity, believing she is the victim of an elaborate conspiracy. But without proof, those voices are drowned by the overwhelming tide of doubt. The election looms, and the tension becomes almost unbearable. Poll numbers swing dramatically overnight. Ezra shoots ahead by a margin so large it seems impossible for Laura to recover. And all the while, Sidwell quietly continues his scheming, ensuring no evidence ties him to Dalton's disappearance or death. He even plants subtle, misleading clues that suggest Dalton may have been distraught or unstable before the accident, muddying the waters even further. But Sidwell's downfall, like that of many powerful criminals, may ultimately come from his arrogance. In believing himself untouchable, he overlooks the smallest details, tiny inconsistencies, overlooked timestamps, digital artifacts, conflicting witness statements, that could eventually unravel the whole narrative. Sonny's tech experts begin analyzing traffic camera footage, even damaged or corrupted files. Dante digs deeper into Dalton's last known movements. Spencer eavesdrops on the wrong conversation between Sidwell's men. Brett, racked with guilt, shares the warning she overheard. One by one, pieces begin to link. And Laura, though battered emotionally, refuses to collapse under Sidwell's manufactured guilt. She knows the truth of her heart. She knows she didn't kill Dalton. And she also knows that Port Charles has seen darker days, days when villains far more dangerous than Sidwell have attempted to destroy its people. What Sidwell hopes will silence Laura may instead ignite the fierce fire that has defined her entire life. Because Laura has never been a victim, not to Helena Cassadine, not to David Gray, not to Cyrus Renaud, and certainly not to a calculating opportunist like Jen Sidwell. As the week edges toward its explosive conclusion, Port Charles stands on the precipice of a revelation that could either save Laura or bury her forever. The only question is whether the truth can surface in time, or whether Sidwell, for all his precision, will make one fatal miscalculation that exposes his entire empire. As tension reaches a dangerous crescendo in Port Charles, the threads of Sidwell's perfect plan begin to fray in small but critical ways, each one revealing that even the most carefully orchestrated schemes carry inherent flaws when pushed into real-world chaos. The morning after the staged accident, Laura Collins wakes with swollen eyes and trembling hands, having barely slept, her spirit weighed down by fear, grief, and the humiliating reality that her integrity is under nationwide scrutiny. While she forces herself to focus on what must come next, legal consultations, campaign damage control, and statements of cooperation, her inner turmoil gnaws relentlessly at her. Laura is no stranger to scandal or danger, but this one feels uniquely cruel because it preys on her compassion, her honesty, and her role as a grandmother trying to protect her family. Meanwhile, Dante Falconeri reviews the accident report again, noticing subtle discrepancies that continue to nag at his mind. The angles of Dalton's injuries, the trajectory of the body, and the oddly pristine condition of the surrounding pavement all raise questions. Why was Dalton walking in that area at that hour? Why did none of the nearby businesses' exterior cameras capture his approach? Why does his phone data show no movement for over an hour before the collision? Each unanswered question feels like a loose puzzle piece waiting to be fitted. Dante knows he must tread carefully. Any suggestion that Laura is being framed could be dismissed as bias, but his reputation for honesty and thoroughness earns him cautious support from his colleagues, who trust his instincts even when they don't fully understand them. Sonny Corinthos, working in the shadows, reaches out to Brick, instructing him to map the digital footprint surrounding the area of the accident. Sonny suspects Sidwell is involved, not because he has evidence yet, but because the timing is too convenient and Sidwell's ambition too blatant. Brick uncovers something small but alarming, a 2-minute gap in the traffic camera footage near the scene, a glitch that shouldn't exist given the system's redundancy. To Sonny, that missing footage is not an error, it's a fingerprint. At the same time, Spencer Cassadine, fueled by frustration and loyalty, boldly approaches Britt Westbourne and presses her about Dalton's relationship with Sidwell. Though Britt hesitates, fearing retaliation, Spencer's persistence finally breaks through. She admits Dalton seemed afraid in the days leading up to his disappearance, constantly checking over his shoulder, muttering about deadlines and expectations he could no longer meet. Spencer immediately takes this to Dante, who adds it to his growing list of suspicions. And as these shadows begin to converge, Sidwell remains arrogantly unaware that multiple investigations, not just legal, but personal, are tightening around him.